Bucks on the Pond podcast. This is Stephen Igo, joined by Jonathan Wagner and Scott Lorbatcher. It is Monday night. That means the podcast is back. ECU coming off another weekend sweep. We've got a lot to discuss. We've got Cliff Godwin's first ejection since we did our last show. A little bit later than we all anticipated, but it's here. And, man, it was pretty juicy as far as drama. We'll get into that and a whole lot more. And we are wearing, if you're watching our live stream or video, if you're into that sort of thing, so the podcast, we've all got our MLB jerseys on. Major League Baseball is underway. I'm rocking the Seattle Mariners King Griffey Jr. Cream Sunday alternates. We've got Jonathan Wagner in his Nats and Scott Lorbatcher in the best offensive baseball currently. The Cincinnati Reds on fire, smashing Kumar Rocker and the Texas Rangers. So that's good to see. Guys, Pirates go 3-1. We'll go around the horn. You guys can share what player you're rocking and representing on this night. And we'll start with Wags. Overall thoughts and your player for the day.
Yeah, my jersey, my options were I could wear a Juan Soto jersey, a Bryce Harper jersey, or a Ryan Zimmerman jersey. So given that the Nats play the Phillies this weekend and I'm still not ready to wear Juan Soto gear yet since he's back in the NL East, it was a pretty easy decision for me today. So I went with a Zimmerman jersey. And who knows, maybe by the end of this year I'll have a James Wood jersey to throw into the rotation there. But, yeah, I think overall this week it started off, and I couldn't watch on Tuesday. I was with a friend of the pod, Philip Wilkington, at Lenovo Center watching the Canes lose. And, I got back, and the first thing after I turned my TV on was the Cliff and Pollard little situation at home plate. So I picked a good time to turn it on and get home. But you lose that game, but I think you showed a lot of positive signs in that game too. And then you played against Rice, and Rice is not a very good baseball team. I don't care about anything else. They're bad. I think you should have beat them worse than you did. But in the end, you got the wins. Right now, that's what you have to do. It might not always be pretty, but you have to win those types of baseball games. And ECU did that this weekend. So it was a successful week. And hopefully – they can improve on some of the inconsistencies that we've touched on in recent weeks. But overall, it was a good week, an exciting week for sure. A lot to talk about tonight, I think. And I'm feeling good coming out of it, but still there's a level that I haven't gotten to yet. And I think there's another level for this team to reach to.
All right, I should, before I throw it to Scott, mention Elon Musk, bots, AI. What other buzzwords do we have, guys? X.
Robots, robo-umps.
Robo-umps. Anything AI. Let's get that. Grok, I believe, is the old X AI system. We always saw these buzzwords because we get like a ton of bots hopping on as soon as we do. We're at approaching 80 viewers already, a few minutes in. All right, Will Lana wants to know, is that Sabo jersey?
Chris Sabo.
Reds legend? Yeah.
Reds legend, wore the Rex specs, played third base. This is actually a Barry Larkin jersey from the late 90s, early 2000s throwback. But yeah, I mean, this week was a good week for the Pirates. Any week where you go 3-1 is a good week. The Duke game, obviously disappointing, kind of highlighted some of the flaws with this team right now with the walks, the first inning defensive lapses that we seem to keep having. Just the inability to get the big hit at the right time. We had every chance to win that game and just didn't do it. It's frustrating to lose that game. Also for me, that I'm now 0-3 on games away from Greenville this year. And my road record continues to be abysmal. And then you go to Rice. All wins are good wins, right? You definitely want to beat Rice by more than that. I think I had predicted us to score 36 runs this week, and we came nowhere close. But we won all three games. Saw Riley Johnson come back. I think that does play a factor in the lineup, and we're still kind of trying to figure out where he fits in that lineup. So maybe some growing pains there as well. But good to have him back. Good to get 3 wins, 6-0 in conference. Gonna have to really dominate this league to have a chance at any sort of at-large this year. So keep doing that, and we'll be okay.
So Chris Sabo, did he use a cork bat?
That may be before my time.
Okay. I Googled Chris Sabo cork bat, and it appears that he did.
Well,
Josh88, let us know.
He's no Jurickson Profar.
This is true. Is it better to use a cork bat or just take steroids? Or just use a torpedo bat like everybody else is doing?
Elliot De La Cruz had one tonight and hit 2 home runs. So,
well, hey, he is he's having a night. He also won me some money, so he can keep using that torpedo bat.
Can we get aluminum torpedo bats for the team? I want to see Boucher with an aluminum torpedo bat in his hands by Tuesday.
I would love to see that as well. And John Collins, just see how far they can hit it when they make contact. Johnny Robertson says last week's Bucks on the Pond ended with Scott jokingly suggesting that I could be making up stats, as SI read a stat that apparently did in fact make up. He says UNC is listed as a Jordan Brand sponsored school, but their baseball team still wears Nike. My apologies. I should have known that, and I will try to do better. So, Johnny, we forgive you. I would say you're not really making up a stat there. That's more of like a clarification item. So, look, we'll call it an error. We'll give you an error on that one, but it's not as egregious as we've seen some of the Pirates have made this year. Guys, what did we learn? We'll go around the horn here. I mean, like we kind of said, ECU, they've really, at this point, they've lost to the teams they should lose to, and they've beaten the teams they should beat. And so I don't know if we learned anything specific this week. Wags, we'll start with you. Did you learn anything new about the Pirates?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways I could go here. There's a positive and there's a negative. I'm going to go to the positive one this time. And I think that we learned that my preseason podcast prediction that Colby Wallace will lead the team in saves has a legitimate chance to happen. And he's a guy, I think coming into the year, we all expected him to pitch more than he has so far. He's just over 5 innings on the mound so far this season. But he pitched 3 times this week, and back-to-back days over the weekend. He gave over an inning, and he got his second save of the season in, I believe, the finale on Sunday. And I think he looked really good. And he's a guy that, when Colby's going out there, you see the potential. And he's got a power fastball. We see it every day at third base and how strong of a defensive third base he's playing. But that translates over to the mound for him. And, with so much talk about his pitching staff and, kind of who's your guy after, Pruitt and Young in the bullpen, it's, who's the next guy to step up? And I think this week showed that Colby can be that guy if they give him the chance to. So to me, that's the biggest takeaway. I think you have another legitimate option in the back end of your bullpen. I still think you're going to have Ethan Young as kind of the first guy out of the bullpen in your high leverage situations more often than not. But you could see this week multiple times where when he comes in, he's going to give you length. He's going to throw 50, 60 pitches, probably not be available the next day. And Brad Pruitt pitched 3 times this week as well. So Brad Pruitt looked really good. But I think after those 2 guys, we've seen it year after year. You can't just rely on the same guys over and over and expect it to not wear on them. We've also seen that they will do that, and they will try their luck, and at times it won't work out. But this year, I think you have another option. You have an arm that, yes, he plays third base every day, but his pitching arm is also a lot more rested than some of these other guys so far. So I think we're going to see more of Colby, and I'm not sure if I was predicting again today that he would 100% lead the team in saves, but I think he has a legitimate chance to.
Good thoughts for sure. Scott, what did you learn about the Pirates in their 3-1 week?
I will say that Braden Burris is a legitimate offensive threat and maybe the best offensive player on this baseball team right now. I texted you guys sitting in the stands at the Duke game that if anyone hit one out that night, it would be pretty impressive. And the ball that Burris hit out would go out of any stadium at any time. And just a really impressive bat to ball skills. Even the balls that he gets out on, he hits hard, just barrels everything. And it's really great to have a guy like that at the top of the lineup. Now with Riley back, it's going to be interesting to see if he continues to hit leadoff or if maybe he slides out to the 2-hole with Riley leading things off, or maybe put Riley second, because with the way that Burks is swinging the bat and getting on base, that does give you the opportunity to bunt him over and score more runs. But right now, I even comparing him to guys like Dixon Williams, who are a little older, and John Collins, Braden Burris is the guy that I want at the plate in any key scenario going forward.
All right, good thoughts. I learned that Jake Hunter can swing a baseball bat. Not very gracefully, but he can hit it hard enough to get a base hit. We also learned, not to go multiple what we learned, but that ECU is 100% still dedicated to bunting. 7 sacrifice bunts. We got a lot to talk about, guys. So we'll just start there. I know we got some questions we'll get into. 7 sack bunts. Like, it's pretty cool. I mean, that you tied the school record for sack bunts, which was done in 1987 against James Madison. The previous high, guys, for the Cliff Godwin era, went back to the game-by-game charts. They had done 4, probably like a handful of times since his arrival. They had never done 5 or 6. They do 7 in the Sunday win over Rice, the 8-5 win. So I have 2 ways of looking at this. Obviously this is ECU's game under Cliff to an extent. I do think it sets up going forward more slash attempts because teams are really going to start to play in against this lineup, which is, I think, part of why this was done. But also, you're giving up 7 outs in a baseball game when you do this. You think about it, you only get 27 outs. You're giving away 7, so you're effectively you really have 20 outs swinging the bat. So, like, if you look at it from that point of view, I'm not as much of a fan of it. But, hey, they were consistently scoring runs. It's hard to argue with it. They won the game, Wag. So we'll go around the horn here. Your thoughts on 7 sacrifice bunts the Pirates executed on Sunday?
Yeah, to me, it's, as much as I will complain about it in real time, to me, it's a sign that this team is kind of getting back to what it's supposed to be. And when ECU baseball is at its best, love it or hate it, they're getting guys on base. They're moving base runners over at whatever cost. And they're scoring runs 1 to 2 at a time. And they're just adding on throughout a game by doing that. And we've talked about this for years, but you're not going to see as many, big innings with 5, 6, 7 runs all in one spot with this style of offense. But you're going to have 1 to 2 almost every inning. And we saw that this weekend. And I do think a team like Rice, who's not very good again, you can afford to do it a little more. And 7's insanity. But, I mean, again, against a team like Rice, you can afford to do it. And I hate to say like a get-right type game for sacrifice bunting because it sounds stupid. But, again, I think this team in Cliff Godwin's tenure has been at its best when it's firing on all cylinders, including bunting, including sacrificing, including slashing. You're going to give away some outs, and I hate that part of it too. And I do think there are going to be games down the stretch where you can't afford to do it that much. But again, overall, it's a positive sign. I think the offense looked more like ECU offense, even if there was still a lot of, inconsistency again and spots where you want to score more runs. But I think we're going to see it a lot more coming through, and it doesn't really matter who's in the lineup. I think there's still kind of some questions there moving forward, but I don't think it's going anywhere. Now that we've kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, it's not going away.
I do want to say before we pitch this to Scott, there were 4 Major League Baseball teams over the course of a 162-game season last year that had 7 or less sacrifice bunts the entire year. The Boston Red Sox had 7, Baltimore Orioles had 6, the Rangers had 6, and the Detroit Tigers had 4 sack bunts the whole year. So when you look at it that way, by the way, Cincinnati Reds had 18, and the Diamondbacks had 34. How about that to lead the league? Scott, your thoughts on the bunts?
Yeah, I mean, sitting there in the first inning of the Duke game, we get the first 2 guys on. Duke's starting pitcher seemed to be struggling a little bit with control. We bunt Wallace over and give up an out. And I just, Kobe Wallace was coming off really kind of a hot streak into that game. he had an opportunity to continue that with runners in scoring position, and I really didn't like giving it up and out there. The Rice game is different. Rice's defense obviously not very good, and you're putting that on film for the rest of the conference, and I think that's fine. It's kind of gimmicky in a way. I remember when Buster Posey was at Florida State, they let him play basically every position in the game. It kind of feels like that, right? Where you did it to prove a point, maybe, or to show you could do it. I'm not 100% sure what leads to 25% of your outs being bunts. Not a huge fan of that personally. And I think the reason that you don't see MLB teams do it is analytics. Like the numbers show that in the grand scheme of things, bunting tends not to work out in your favor more often than not. Now that's of course in Major League Baseball with Major League infielders, Major League defenses that are typically a lot better than most college teams. So it's not apples to apples there either. But I'm not a huge fan of bunting that much. And I'm really not a huge fan of bunting guys in the middle of your lineup with runners in scoring position already. I think that, especially early in games, if we can step on the throat of our opponent, score 3-4 runs in an inning, that does a lot more good than just getting a run across to just get a lead. Because it seems like when we only score one or only score two, we tend to give it right back a lot of times, which is also pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it a lot of different ways. So some people despise bunting, don't want to do it in any circumstance. Other people love it. Obviously, ECU. Drew Downs goes 0 for 0 with 3 sack bunts. By the way, pinch ran in the third inning, which I know, after a Braxton Trammell single, which we have thoughts about as well. So, look, I mean, ECU won the game, and they continue to manufacture runs, and Rice honestly just does not have a good enough offense to make up that big a deficit. So, ended up working out great. I'm more of a fan of the sack bunt in a game where it's going to be like a pitcher's duel, and it's just going to be hard to get runs across. If you want to do that for early, in the game to get a run across, I'm a fan of that. Or late, you're up a run in the 8th and you're looking for the extra run. I'm a fan of it then. But to each his own. And look, we can question it. Cliff Godwin has won a lot more baseball games than he's lost, so clearly there's something to it. Even though at times I know fans love the question, and it's a great baseball topic. All right, a lot of questions coming in. We'll first address the Jake Hunter situation. Just man, how awesome was that Saturday in a game that looked like ECU was going to lose, and a lot of people are going to be pissed off. They kind of come to life late. Finally, get old nemesis J.D. McCracken out of the game. Who knew that he was such an elite arm against the Pirates? He is. But Pirates find a way to win, and Jake Hunter, the hero. Wags, what can you say about just pitching, hitting, scoring? He did it all.
Yeah, it was awesome. You think back in time to some of those moments that we've had like that. The most recent, I think, was Garrett Saylor coming through with a big hit. And a couple years before that, we had Matt Bridges getting a hit. And in the same season, he pinch ran and scored the game-winning run, I believe. So, it was really cool. But at the time, I did kind of realize, when he was coming to the plate, I'm like, oh, crap. And I'm like, we're not going to score. And then he starts a rally. And he pokes a single through. He moves up as a base runner, and he comes in to score. And, yes, I agree. My first thought watching the swing was, oh, man, we just lost maybe our third best bullpen arm to a torn ACL on the swing. But he stayed upright, which was good to see, and he looked like he knew what he was doing, outside of the launch from the batter's box. But it was really cool. And those kind of moments, I think, with a team like this where you are young, you do have a lot of inexperience, and you're still trying to find yourself, I think a moment like that, while in the grand scheme of things, it could seem very small, that kind of moment can kind of be a difference maker throughout a season, especially kind of when what's coming forward for this team. So it was awesome, and I love those kinds of moments, and it came through big. But I was also thinking, like, man, who else is going to come hit if we pinch hit for him? And I'm like, Michael Kalenic is the only guy left on the bench, I'm pretty sure, and we've which just quick side note, if you keep scorebook for baseball games like I do it for every ECU game. That's a disaster. I had to erase so many times just in each individual spot in the lineup there because I went from one guy to two guys to three guys all the way up to six guys in the one spot. And I'm like, I hate everything that's happening. And, man, but in then extra innings too, it's a mess. But, it was cool. And, again, I think that can be kind of a launching moment to give you some more momentum. And that's a play we're going to remember not just this year, but I think we're going to remember that for years.
Man, it was incredible. Scott, it's crazy to look at the ECU stats and see the two players batting 1,000, Parker Bird and Jake Hunter, which is pretty sweet. Your thoughts on Jake's big Saturday?
It was shades of Ben Terwilliger at Cincinnati. But, yeah, I mean, you talk about 2-out hits get you to heaven. Well, 2-out hits when you're the pitcher of record to set up the game-winning run. I mean, it's hard to beat that. The helicopter tornado, whatever you want to call it, swing was, maybe not his finest moment, but when you put the barrel of the bat on the ball and shoot it the other way, good things happen. So I was pretty impressive by Jake Hunter. And Jake Hunter's a guy that, we following the team this closely, you start to get an appreciation for, guys that really have had to grind it out through their college careers. I would put Jake Hunter firmly in that category. Has fought through injuries, has been a weekend starter. Kind of was at one time viewed as maybe the next big starting pitcher for ECU that could maybe move into a Friday night role. Eventually, had some injuries that kind of took that away, and he's done everything that's asked of him, including hit. And I'm just that's a guy but kind of like Jake Kuchmaner, that maybe won't be a name that the average fan remembers 10 years down the road, but I think it's a guy that the three of us will always think of as a really good Pirate and a guy that we really appreciate the effort that he's put in during his time at ECU.
All right. Kaser Maley's from Carolina Curveball says, when was the last time this happened? He says, was Garrett Saylor at Cincinnati? Wasn't that Terwilliger who got the hit at Cincinnati? I do remember Saylor got a hit. I just can't remember who it was against.
Saylor did it in the conference tournament, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think Saylor was later.
Okay. Yeah. Saylor, I'm seeing 1-for-1 in the 2022 season. I believe it was the conference tournament. I'm going through and verifying now. All right, hitting statistics. Where are we at here? Hitting. Yep. Cincinnati on May 20. It was Cincinnati on May 26th. Wow. I guess that would have been the conference tournament as well. So Cincinnati just hates. But Cincinnati just hates facing ECU pitchers in the box, I guess. Cincinnati, by the way, saw I think every ECU player bat that was possible to get in that bat over that 2-year span where ECU faced them 50 times.
We played them 10 times in one season or something like that, right?
Yeah.
We played them 8 and then in the
twice in the conference tournament. God. And now they're finally good. We need that RPI help.
Hold on. They're not good.
No, I think
they're not
good. They're not good.
But they took a series from Duke. What happened?
They fell off a cliff like you expect Cincinnati to do.
Right after they got ranked.
They're not bad. They're still top 70 in RPI.
Okay.
So they do have maybe the best throwback uniforms in college baseball, though.
They do have some pretty sick ones. All right, let's get to – we got a bunch of questions. We'll try to start running through some of these. Cameron's got a question – or he's got a comment. I'll just read it. We'll come back to this in a little bit when we talk postseason picture. He says, it's pretty wild to think ECU could only lose one conference series and still not make the tournament. This conference has to do something to improve baseball. We can't keep being put in situations where we can't lose midweek games. You won't have success. We've got comments about the torpedo bats. We've got comments about high C's and wants to see Davin Whitaker. Somebody mentioned that Davin Whitaker catch. Bruce Willis, who also said he was as high as he's ever been since I last interviewed him. He says Whitaker's catch was scary and great. Brian Wallace, I think this is an interesting discussion point. He says, thoughts on Whitaker's amazing catch in foul territory that cost us a run. Let it go or catch it. All right. So here's the situation. I pulled up the box score. It's 2-0 in the bottom of the seventh. Rice led. This was Saturday's game. Rice had second and third, nobody out. And Blaine Brown, their best hitter, by the way, hit like 340. Hit a sky shot down the line. Whitaker makes a just insane catch, like falling into the bullpen. And a lot of people are saying he should have let it go. I am a fan of making that catch. It was a 2-0 count. It's your best hitter. And, yeah, you give up a run, but there's nobody out. You need an out at that point. And so I'm a fan of making the catch. Obviously, a run scored. That was the only run that scored in the inning. And it kind of turned momentum. ECU scored the next inning. I think if you let that go, it's a 2-1 count. Still nobody out. Still second and third. You're risking a base hit. But, I mean, I can see it both ways. Your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, you got a guy on third with less than 2 outs. He's probably going to score no matter what. Even if you don't make the catch, then you're basically depending on an infield pop-up, strikeout, chopper back to the pitcher, something like that to prevent that run. If you can make an out in that situation, it's still a 3-run game. You make the out. I think if it's the ninth inning, or the bottom of the eighth, and it's 2-0, then maybe not, because you know that runs are way more at a premium then. But in the seventh inning, runner on third, I think if you can get an out, you take an out.
Wags, do you think Davin Whitaker should just let it go, or did he make the right call?
I think he made the right call, and I also think that in the heat of that moment, he's not really thinking about that when just in that situation he's not. And it was a heck of a catch. First of all, that's the main thing here. But yeah, I just think in that situation, especially with kind of how this pitching staff is gone at times as of late, don't give away an out. If you have an opportunity to retire any hitter, especially the best hitter in a lineup that's not all that good, I think you take the out, you trade the run, you have plenty of baseball left to make up those runs, and that's what happened. So, yeah, to me, that's just always kind of been my mentality is if you can get the out, you got to get the out. And whatever happens, happens. But, yeah, like Scott said, if it's in the ninth inning and you know that run could be the difference, then I think it's a different conversation. But in the context of this situation, you made the right play because you made the play.
All right, we have High Seas adds Pirates are tied for ninth in the country in sack and bunts. I guess this is sack bunts, not just bunts in general. So Pirates, I feel like ECU really didn't bunt a lot to begin this year, and now they're like trying to catch up. Fake bunt. Speaking of that, comments and says Saturday super eventful night. Rice football. Yeah, did y'all watch the Cliff Godwin interview earlier today?
Yeah,
I have not yet gotten to see it.
So he said basically that the Rice football team was above their dugout and just crushing them during Saturday's game, and he said that it affected the guys. And like honestly, I guess they didn't handle it too well because like nobody's at these games except for the Rice football players apparently. So we'll get into that in a minute. Fake bunt adds Davin, best foul ball catch, but bad decision, which we disagree with. We just talked about. He says Braden Burst at second base, highlight. Great play, by the way. And then he had a low light because he didn't hold the tag when a guy stole the base and overslid the bag. And then platoon finish. Anybody know what he's mentioning there? Platoon finish?
Maybe just the Saturday, like just how many guys that we use.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Trying to get the platoons off the bench. And then Jake in all caps is a shout out to Jake Hunter. So Fake Bun also says, to be fair, was there any other D1 football team chirping a baseball team behind their dugout in the nation? Johnny will fact check me. So, yeah, that was crazy. But, hey, I guess when you can't get regular fans, you just get your football team out there, Wags.
Hey, maybe that's the real reason Davin Whitaker made the catch. He knew that the football team was going to give him hell if he went back to the dugout after letting it go. And then, back to that for a second. I do think if you do let that ball go, this is ECU. We know what happens there. They hit a tank the next pitch. And if something like that happens, then we're all just like, I think a lot of people are going to be coming after Davin Whitaker saying that was so stupid. So it's a double-edged sword either way. But man, yeah, just on the broadcast, that the Rice football team, they were giving this team a lot. But hey, that's baseball, and it's unfortunate for them that they were the only people in the stands because nobody cares about Rice baseball anymore, unfortunately, which is a shame. But hey, they were there, they were making some noise, and I'm watching a ball almost to fly out of the warning track in the Nats game. But yeah, that's baseball. We need more of that, and we need more just general people in the stands so it doesn't look like a deserted island out there in a D1 college baseball game.
Yeah, Scott, we were texting. I mean, just as it thunders at my house, so I don't know if I can hear that on the mic or not. Probably the storm come through. The I mean, it's just sad. Like the Friday game in particular, turning that on, there was like 6 people in the stands, and Rice won a national championship in 2003, and now they are one of the worst teams in college baseball with no fan support. And I do think they played better this weekend. I think their coach has at least lit a fire under them, but they're still lacking talent. I just hope they can turn it around and become respectable because it's pretty sad to see what they've become.
Yes, there was a post on the board today where Rice, over an 11-year stint, they had 7 College World Series appearances, won the national championship, and now you look and it's like it never happened. You know, it is sad. I remember when Rice came when I was in school, you know, in the Conference USA days, it was like a big deal for us to take a game against Rice. I think we actually hadn't won a series over Rice until Cliff Godwin had like gotten here or something like that, or some crazy stat. But yeah, it's just now you play Rice and they don't have a guy that you look at as like, well, that guy's going to be a future big leaguer. You know, I saw Anthony Rendon play for Rice when I was in school. Like that's a cool moment, and that's something that, you know, whenever I talk about college baseball, I always talk about how cool it is to see guys like Kyle Till or Anthony Rendon or Trevor Bauer, Jackie Bradley Jr. Like play in college and then see them play in a major league stadium. Like it's awesome. And now you look at Rice, and that's a program that has like Lance Berkman went to Rice, right? Like he's like their volunteer assistant, right? He's their Bryant Packard. They have Lance Berkman as Bryant Packard on their team. That's super impressive. And they somehow can't recruit well enough to compete in a league that, quite frankly, is not very good at baseball. And it's shocking. And, you know, to answer that poster's question, I would probably still take a national championship and 7 College World Series appearances if it meant falling off the face of the earth 20 years later. But it is something to think about for sure.
Yeah, Fake Bunt follows up with he says Hiram Boca Chica not going to make it to the show. Elite name, by the way.
I mean, that is a baseball name. That's a good looking back of the jersey name right there.
Boca Chica. He was their leadoff guy. That was great stuff for sure. So yeah, sad affairs at Rice, but hopefully they can turn it around. Johnny Robertson says this is only the second time since the Pirates have been in the American that they have swept the first conference road series of the season, and the first since 2019, South Florida. He also adds, of the 301 schools that have played a conference game, ECU is one of only 3 teams in the nation that have not lost in league play. Now, how many of those teams have played Memphis and Rice or teams of that caliber? I don't know, but I'm guessing not many. We also had a comment from Kendra Presley. She said, I did not understand taking Pruitt out of the Duke game, which reminds me we need to talk about the Cliff Godwin ejection as well. So Pruitt pitched the 6th and 7th, I think was removed for the 8th for Colby Wallace. I did go back and look, guys. Pruitt, he threw a lot. He's thrown a lot recently. He threw the Saturday game against Memphis 4 2/3 innings. So that's 2 days of rest coming back for the Duke game on Tuesday. That's a short turnaround on nearly 5 innings pitched. So 2 innings is probably the max you want to go there. Rice, he threw on Friday 2 innings on 2 days rest, and then he threw 4 innings yesterday on 1 day's rest. So I think they got to be careful with the usage of Pruitt, so I have no problem taking him out there. Scott, you were at the game. Did you notice anything?
Yeah, I noticed that Gabe Nard and Talon for
Gabe
Duke
Nard.
were pretty daggone impressive. But no, I mean, I think Pruitt's a guy that you probably had a pitch count that you expected him to throw. It's like 25 coming into the game. And as much as it would have been nice to beat Duke, you got to protect his arm because I think he is a big league talent. So probably the right decision. I don't know that Colby Wallace was maybe the right decision in that next moment, but he obviously had pitched better this weekend. But yeah, ECU's inability to find legitimate starting pitching on the weekend definitely eats into their ability to extend guys on Tuesday. And I think it's a big reason for our struggles, our long time struggles on midweek games. Is because our guys that can maybe give you 3 or 4 solid innings on a Tuesday have to give you 3 or 4 solid innings on Saturday or Sunday. Just far too often.
Yeah, and I mean I saw somebody, I think it was Kenny, ask about getting the injured pitchers back earlier. Doesn't sound promising. Again, Cliff Godwin said earlier today, you can check out that interview. Brett Antolik continues to get looked at by doctors. He's continuing to have hip pain and doesn't sound promising. And that Ryan Towers is picking up a baseball today. I haven't heard how that went, but essentially Cliff said they hope to have him back by May. So at this point, I'm not really counting on either of those guys to be back. All right, Chris Allen says, why was there no beer at Duke? And then Casey O'Malley says, Jack Coombs ice cream cones better than Blue Devils morals. So why was no beer? Is it a dry campus?
I don't think so.
They probably just don't have room to serve beer.
Surprised they have concession stands.
They have one basically cart okay, so let's talk about Duke, because I came last week and said that Duke pricing was great. It was only $9 for a ticket. That's fantastic. Then you get there and you pay $18 for not good Bojangles. When fries have been left in a warmer for too long, it's very evident. So
it's not the Boshamer Stadium Bojangles?
The Boshamer Stadium Bojangles is undefeated as far as stadium Bojangles go. And that goes to like the Bojangles at Bristol Motor Speedway, which is up there, the Bojangles at Charlotte Motor Speedway, which is pretty good. Boshamer Bojangles beats all of them. And then later in the game, I went to get a soda and a hot dog, and it was like $12. I was like, what are we doing? You're talking about an $80 billion endowment at Duke, and you play in a Cracker Jack stadium where your coach has to use the same bathroom as the fans and has to walk through the concourse when he gets ejected, and you can't afford some local beers, a lot of good breweries in Durham, and maybe just get a hot dog cart out there, some local vendor with a hot dog cart to sell reasonably priced hot dogs and not just food that's in a heat lamp. I just was severely unimpressed with the Duke facilities at a campus that has, a legendary basketball stadium and a football stadium that looks like they're doing some renovations too.
Look, I'm just going to call it like I say it and I see it, or as I say it, I guess, depending on how you want to say it. It's a dog shit stadium. It's a absolute joke. Sorry for anybody listening that has kids.
Well put.
It's a joke.
It is the worst college baseball stadium I have been
to. Speaking of dog crap, talking crap after you take a ball 4 and spiking your bat. Let's get into this. Cliff Godwin ejected. We all expected it to come in the Coastal Series, I think, and that did not happen. It comes against Duke. I don't think Cliff and Chris Pollard are best of friends.
They're not now.
They're definitely not now. We know Eric Tyler's on that staff, former ECU player. He was the first base coach. So, Wags, your take on what what transpired in Durham?
Yeah, well, I think again, I didn't watch until right before that happened, but I think it was Scott texting us throughout the game and kind of saying, like, Albright is talking all this crap, after every walk. I think he had one credited at bat for the night because he walked 4 times. And, it's one of those things. I think it's interesting that we're having this conversation now because it reminds me of a conversation we had earlier in the year, which was Michael Kalinic's first, kind of at bats in a Pirate uniform and kind of his antics at the plate after he walks. And I don't think it's quite to the same level, but from the sound of it, I think Albright, he drew his walk in a big spot and he had some words for the pitcher. Cliff didn't like that. So Cliff is supposedly yelling at Eric Tyler, or I guess he's yelling at the umpire, probably saying, do something about this, control the game. And then once it extended out of the dugout, then I think Pollard thought that Cliff was probably talking to Albright. And in reality, Cliff was probably talking to both Albright and Tyler, and probably a little bit of both, but in reality, probably to the player, but in Cliff's reality, probably to Tyler. So it's one of those. I don't have a problem with any of it. And with the antics at the plate, that's where I think the issue is. And it's one of those things, there is a line, and I think it probably got crossed. Again, I don't know what was said. So it could be one of those things where he's just fired up and he's kind of looking at the pitcher and shaking his head and doing something like that, which whatever. Don't love that kind of stuff. But in the end, it's a fun game. It's a big moment, and he came through. So I don't hate that aspect of it. But when I see, if Cliff interprets it as a player, kind of going after one of his players, Cliff's going to defend his guy. But if you're Chris Pollard, then you're also, from your vantage point, whether Cliff's talking to your player or your first base coach, you're also going to have your guy. So I have no issue with Chris Pollard. And what happened there was a little extreme, the way he kind of stormed the home plate and looked like he was going to fight Cliff and then did not. Yes, but it was fun, I'll tell you that. Again, this was the first thing I saw with my own eyes from this game. I literally turned on the TV. I got it over the ESPN Plus, and I kind of looked up after I got it up, and I realized what was happening. I'm like, oh my God. I couldn't believe it, but it was awesome. Just as a college baseball fan, it's fun. I love it. I love these kind of in-state games against two teams that are playing for a lot and two teams that want to beat the crap out of each other. So it was fun. I enjoyed every second of it, but I think the lesson we learn here is that maybe Michael Kalinic should be careful moving forward.
I will say, at least from what we've seen, and we have not confirmed this because you can't hear what's happening. At least Kalinic, he seems like he's talking to himself. There's a video of the Duke guy, literally just looking directly at Lance Williams and just saying something as he spikes his bat. So and to make it more confusing, it's Tyler Albright and it's Eric Tyler. So which Tyler was Cliff talking to? I don't know. Cliff did say on the show today that basically he was giving it to Eric Tyler after talking to the home plate umpire, and that without saying it, he wasn't going to let Chris Pollard come onto the field and act like he was going to try and beat him up. I think Cliff said that was not going to happen. And the funniest part was, and I'll let you weigh on this too, Scott, because you were there, they showed on the broadcast, Pollard leaving the field. And, he got off the field right away, right when he got tossed. But it just showed him, walking out of this gate because the stadium's so crappy. By himself, he just disappeared into the darkness because there's no clubhouse to go into or anything. So I don't know your thoughts on what you saw transpire in person.
Yeah, I think it's a couple factors that led up to it, right? The strike zone was pretty bad the majority of the night, and so Cliff was probably going to get ejected in that game at some point, no matter what. He was pretty upset about the strike zone from the third inning on, and it was bad. I think Jake Hunter got squeezed early, that led to a couple runs for Duke, that and the drop fly ball in the outfield. But then I think it's different when Kalinic definitely seems more like he's reacting to himself and what he's doing than reacting to an opponent or directing it at an opponent. He was very much on that line early, and I think more recently he's kind of dialed it back to slapping his own chest, kind of shaking his head, or looking at Cliff or Palumbo, whoever happens to be coaching third at the time. So I think that's part of it. And then the crowd factor, right? Like it was probably 70-30 ECU to Duke fans, and the 30% Duke fans, they might have well been at a Coastal Plains League game, like where you have no real vested interest. So it's got to be tough when you're a Duke player, especially a guy like Albright that's from North Carolina. You're at your home stadium. The opposing fan bases from local schools probably outnumber your fans every single time. I'm sure NC State was 3-1 against Duke fans this past weekend. And you got to kind of use that as your own motivation when you're playing road games at home. And that's a tough look for anybody. And so I think the Duke players were kind of creating their own atmosphere where they internalize it and fight back to this hostile takeover that's been happening by ECU fans, and reacted to our players. And then Cliff took exception to that. Pollard takes exception to Cliff. You got the two Tyler situation. I think we also tried to hire Eric Tyler back at one point, so that's a factor. I mean, there's easy to see a lot of bad blood situations brewing there. And then, the Duke players were chirpy. And I think you have to be kind of chirpy when you don't have a crowd to get behind you. Maybe they should get their football team to sit on the berm the way that Rice did. But yeah, I appreciate Cliff sticking up for his players. It was funny to see him have to go into the dugout, collect his belongings, all of his things, and then walk across the field. And it looked like somebody was maybe trying to take like a selfie with him on the way out of the stadium. I don't know if the cameras picked up on that. That was maybe one of the funnier things that I've seen. But yeah, having to have your coach, one, use the same bathrooms as everyone else, and then two, walk through the crowd into the parking lot instead of into a clubhouse is, quite frankly, embarrassing for a program of Duke's caliber. So really, it's just more of an indictment on their, as you said, dog shit stadium.
Yeah, look, Duke's a great team, man. They got elite talent. I know they've been scuffling on the mound at times, but they're a great team. And Pollard's done a heck of a job there. Eric Tyler's done a heck of a job. Nobody's denying that. But the stadium's a joke. And they carried, the guy carried himself like a bit of an ass. And that's just is what it is, man. And I think Wags put it best. ECU's going to stick up for their guys. Duke's going to stick up for their guys. We move on, although we have plenty of drama to discuss along the way. And, so, all right, we could talk about that all day, but we'll have a 4-hour show if we do. Chris does say if there was a college baseball coach Royal Rumble, who beats Cliff? He's basically Roman Reigns. I don't know. I feel like we almost had Tennessee versus ECU in a Super last year. That would have been intense with Vitello and Cliff going at it. It would have been some nice shouting matches. Any other candidates come to mind?
Kevin O'Sullivan of Florida is a real strong contender there.
Who's the coach of Kentucky?
Nick Mangione. He's too nice. Yeah. He's too nice.
This week,
he pissed this week.
No, you're right. He did
popped out of his neck on Sunday on the getaway day. That was a good one.
Get Mangione and Roselle in there going at Cliff. Add some more ECU former guys to the.
Ryder Giles too. He's on that staff.
Yeah, man.
The Kentucky Pirates.
The Cliff Godwin tree extends a long way. I don't think Jason Dietrich would participate in the Royal Rumble, but
I think he would just zen you to death.
Yeah, this is true. All right, guys, let's talk conference picture and postseason picture. Right now, I just put up the conference RPI. The Southland Conference is somehow ahead of the American in RPI. So it's SEC, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Conference USA, Southland, American, Sun Belt, and Big West. You do have Independent listed as second, but it's just Oregon State. So according to WardNolan.com. So like I'm not counting them. So the conference hasn't been terrible. It hasn't been good. ECU right now, the metrics aren't kind. ECU, long season to go, but 82 in the RPI. Strength of schedule is 119. Non-conference strength of schedule is 56. You've played two of the worst teams in the conference. You're 1-6 quad one. You're 1-1 quad two. 4-1 quad three. 12-2 quad four. So, Mr. RPI, Scott Lorbatcher, any opportunities ahead to improve this resume? What's your take on where ECU sits? As now we're about to be into April, I think it's time to start looking at the postseason picture a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's FAU this week, who was 3 weeks ago 19 in RPI. They're now 80. Got swept by UTSA. They are still 19-9, and opponent record does factor in your RPI, so that's helpful there. UAB is another team that has just dropped like 70 spots the last couple of weeks. Then lost the series to Wichita. But UTSA and USF, who are last two series, which is kind of nice to have them at the end. UTSA is up to 41, 23-7. I think they have a winning record against quad 1 and 2 combined. Win over Texas. Swept FAU this past weekend, who's probably going to end up top 75 in RPI. So UTSA is looking like they could potentially be an at-large team. And then USF is now 38 in RPI. They did get a sweep, actually 4 sweeps in the conference this week. Sweep over Tulane. If USF, who plays a pretty good schedule as well, can continue to win, they could potentially be a quad 1 road series for East Carolina. We do play them on the road, right? At the end of the year, we play them in.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So a quad 1 road series win at the very end of the year, when you really need an RPI boost, would be pretty phenomenal, and something that we have not had in a very long time. So that, and then going into the conference tournament, if USF or UTSA is still playing well, then you could see RPI boosts from actual conference tournaments games, which in the past we've basically either broken even on or lost points. So ECU I think is at 82 right now in RPI. We're not in the picture for at large with that RPI. You're gonna have to get that down, definitely under 50, probably somewhere in the 30s if you want to really have an ability to make this tournament without winning the conference tournament. And we've all seen what a crapshoot the conference tournament is over the years.
Right now, UTSA and South Florida, you mentioned it, your final 2 series of the year, they're the top 2 teams in RPI in the league, and they are the top 2 teams on ECU's heels. So a long way to go between now and then. But those could end up being for the conference championship, which, I mean, that if ECU wins the league again, you're probably going to have to win those 2 series. So I think if you do that, and to Cameron's point earlier, if you lose a series before then, realistically, if you're dominating the league and you beat UTSA and you lose 2 out of 3 to South Florida on the road, if they're this good and you still win the league, that's probably not going to kill you in the RPI. Obviously, you'd want that on your resume as a series win, but that would be the only scenario I could see ECU losing a series and still making it as an at-large. But I don't know, Wags, how do you see this conference taking shape now that we're kind of in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, seeing 2 top 41 teams is nice when none of them are ECU in a typical year. But, yeah, it is kind of like, you wish you were in one of those spots and you were sitting 41 in RPI and you had a 36 and coming up, and because then it gives you a little more wiggle room. At that point, you're in at-large consideration. And, I did my first mid-season field of 64 today, and I had ECU winning the conference as the automatic, and, UTSA and USF were both right there. And I think just looking at schedules and what I expect to happen, I ended up giving UTSA, I believe, an at-large bid just as of now, and a lot's going to change. The bubble is a crapshoot this time of the year anyways. But yeah, and I think to me, another thing is looking at midweek games, the RPIs aren't looking as hot as they were maybe a couple weeks ago. I mean, UNCW, I think we all kind of penciled that in as, that could be your boost. It's a 3-game series. You're down 0-1 in that series, obviously, now. But UNCW is like a 500 baseball team, and they're RPI 97. So you need to win tomorrow, and I think you need to win the game at home next week or the week after that, whenever it is. And I think you need to win that series and hope that UNCW turns it on and maybe can up their RPI into the 50, 60 range and at least give you just another semblance of a resume booster. And NC State's 52. You play them twice. Elon's 226. You play them this week on Wednesday on the second half of a back-to-back day midweek, and then you're on the road at Elon. Their RPI 226. You can't drop either one of those games. If you drop either one of those games, you're done. And that it's as simple as that, I think. And then you're left with Campbell, who's 105, which honestly is a little better right now than what I thought they would be a while ago, but it's still not great. So, yeah, I think I've said every week that the margin of error is pretty much non-existent for this team, and I feel even more so that way right now. So you need to keep sweeping. You're doing what you need to right now. You're not beating the teams that you're supposed to beat. You are sweeping the teams that you're supposed to sweep. You have to continue doing that, especially this weekend at home against FAU. While they're 79 in RPI, if you go 2-1, it does not help you nearly as much as a 3-0 would. And then Charlotte next week is 95. That's another one. Ideally, you go in and sweep. And yeah, you need to sweep all of them. But if you start going 2-1 this weekend, 2-1 next weekend, 2-1 the week after that, then I think you're playing with fire. So I don't feel good. I still think the most realistic path to the postseason is winning the conference tournament. And that's a conversation for a different day, the conference tournament.
Yeah, such a long ways away. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid point. And it's hard to look, you guys know baseball well. I mean, it's hard to go out there and just win every game. I mean, it's just not realistic. And so, like, you're going to have some losses, and that's what makes it tough. You just have to, you're just going to have to really limit them. 18-10 right now, ECU, but a lot of, again, 18-10, but 12 of those wins against quad 4. If you do win tomorrow, you would have a quad 2 win, as top 120 on the road is a quad 2 UNCW 97 in RPI. And then FAU would be, I believe, quad 3 at home. Let's see here. Yeah, quad 3 at home currently. So at 79. All right. Let's take a look at our predictions, guys. Our bowl predictions last week were horrific. I had Jaden Winter victory. He did not pitch. He will start tomorrow. Should be a bullpen day for both teams. Scott had a bunch of runs, right, that were not scored.
Yep, sure did. 36. They didn't come close. I don't even think they got half of that. So, good job, guys.
Wags, you had career high in strikeouts for Lance Williams, which did not happen.
Yeah, I said he would do that at one start on Saturday, and I knew immediately when he came in on Tuesday I was done.
Fair enough, fair enough. By the way, my Mariners no-run first inning did not hit. They were down 6-0 in the top of the first. So that is I really want to take my jersey off right now. But I'll keep it
just
on.
Lost, too.
Yeah. Bucks on the Pond parlay, once again, not success.
Yeah, maybe that should be our bold prediction. How long into the year will they all three win on the same day?
Game 162.
At least June.
Maybe we need a Liberty situation for all three of our opponents in a day. Just 3-9-0 forfeit win.
Gosh, we need it, man. All right, yeah. Predictions for the week ahead. We'll do that, and then we'll go bowl predictions. Wags, what do you think? 5-game week. It's at UNCW, Elon, then FAU at home for 3.
Yeah, I never feel good about a 5-game week, and especially when the first one's at UNCW. Games at UNCW just never seem to go well. Of course, I think I want to say we won in Wilmington last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, ECU swept.
But just in recent memory, when you think of at UNCW, positive things don't come to mind. And on a week like this where, Jaden Winter's on the bump, and I think he's looked good at times this year. He hasn't pitched a whole lot, but it's a bullpen day with a depleted bullpen. And it's not only a bullpen day with a depleted bullpen, but it's the first game of a 5-game week where your top guys are coming off of 60 pitches in the last couple of days of this past weekend. So I don't feel great about the midweek. I think you beat the crap out of Elon just because I think you should beat the crap out of Elon. And so I think you do that on Wednesday. I don't see you winning at UNCW, and partly because I think you need to. And Tuesday, I think you split the midweek. And then I just think this weekend we're going to see the effect of a depleted bullpen a little bit and having to try some different guys out, not knowing how it's going to go. So I think you're going to go 2-1 over the weekend. You're going to win the weekend, but I do think you're going to lose your first conference game just because it's a 5-game week, and FAU is a solid baseball team. So I have 3-2 on the week.
Scott?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The road trip after a road trip is always a tough game. Wilmington's always a tough game. Pretty much any in-state opponent seems to be really motivated against East Carolina. The way that, we are against, the Dukes and NC States and UNC of the world. There's nothing wrong with that. You should want to beat us. I think we have a great program and one that you should be proud of if you can defeat. So I'll go 1-1 on the midweeks, and I think we go 2-1 over the weekend. Right now, Saturdays, we seem to be lost on the mound in a way that is kind of frustrating. And so I think that we win Friday, drop one Saturday, rebound, and win on Sunday, which would be a positive. 5-game weeks are also just really tough, and I think they're just such a drag. So I think we trade wins and losses all week and go 3-2.
I hate to do it, but I'm going 3-2 as well. I think if ECU wins at UNCW, they go 5-0. But it's just always a weird game, and it's gonna take a lot. But UNCW coming off and they lost a freaking series in North Carolina A&T, which is a joke. But
and
Campbell back-to-back weekends, but they'll be ready to go for the Pirates. I think it'll be tough if ECU wins that game. I think they have a great week. But I'm going 3-2, split the midweek. You win 2 out of 3, which, I mean, again, if you be 8-1 in conference at that point, it's pretty damn good. And you'd still have some RPI games ahead. It wouldn't be an ideal week from an RPI scenario, but you wouldn't be dead. And the FAU pitching staff is pretty solid, led by Trey Beard, one of the best pitchers in the league. Friday night should be a dandy. Ethan Norby versus Trey Beard, both lefties. Beard this year, 66 strikeouts in 38 innings. Opponents are hitting 165 against him. So that should be a heck of a game on Friday, and should be a fun, low-scoring game. So now it'll be a high-scoring game. All right, bold predictions. Who wants to start it off?
I'm ready. Oh,
go ahead, right. You're ready. You got to it first.
All right. So pitching has not worked out for me this year with bold predictions, so I am throwing it away and I'm never coming back. Sorry, Austin Knight, but I'm going to go back to the basics and go very not basic. And Braden Burris on the week will hit for the cycle. He's going to have a single and a double. Those two are a given, I think. But I think he's going to come through with a homer, and I think he's going to get a triple. Maybe it comes against Elon because Elon sucks. But Braden Burris with a weekly cycle. Sorry.
Scott?
I'm going with Braden and Braxton, the Bras, to combine for 12 RBIs this week.
All right. The Bras, 12 RBIs. Man, which way do I want to go here? I'm not ready, but screw it. We are going to get a 2-homer week from Austin Irby. He has not homered since March 4th when he hit 2 home runs against Gardner-Webb. That is several games ago. I think he hits 2 home runs this week. That is my bold prediction.
I like it.
Skull Pirate says we need someone on the panel that doesn't agree. Look, man, sometimes it's just easy. And when we agree, usually the opposite happens, which could be 5-0 or it could be 0-5.
We agreed last week we all had 3-1. So
that is true. I think I've been right with my prediction 2 weeks in a row, so I'll take it. Not my bold prediction, just regular ass predictions. Chris Allen says I'm going with Duke over Houston and Florida over Auburn. That's not the predictions we're doing. What is basketball, Chris? Who y'all picking for the championship, though?
I'm going to take
Duke over Florida.
Yeah, I'm going to take Florida over Auburn, and Duke over Houston is a game that intrigues me. I think Duke is just so good everywhere, but Houston's elite defensively. But I do think that Duke is that good, and I'm going to have Duke over Florida in the championship. I think that they will break through and get theirs.
On November 4th of last year, I put $25 on Duke to win the national championship, to win $275. And I'm sticking with my prediction of Duke. Then I will be $275 richer at the end of the week, and I will use that money on myself.
All right.
Not NIL. Not getting the money, Cooper Flag. You gotten enough.
Did we all just agree again?
Losing the championship.
You said Duke.
I have Duke over Florida, yep.
Okay.
Sorry, Skull. It's time for us to log off. I would normally turn on the Mariners game, but the good news is I can go to sleep tonight. Not have to say I have to watch it. And screw the Kraken. They suck. All right, we got to get out of here. It's been fun. We've had a lot discussed. We didn't even really get into the Riley Johnson situation, but we'll save that for next week. We'll see if he keeps playing. I do know Tuesday is the past the midway point game. To medically redshirt, you have to play in less than 30% of your games, and you can't play past the midway point. So if he plays Tuesday, I believe that means this would be his final year of eligibility. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. For Scott, for Wags, we are the Bucks on the Pond crew. Our Major League Baseball teams mostly suck, but it's fun to talk ECU baseball. So we will join you next Monday night, 9 o'clock. We'll see you then to recap another week of Pirate Baseball. We're out.